It seems like, of course, everything in the NFL has been kind of slowing down a tick just because, the first week of free agency is always just bat crap insane. Then we kind of slowed down, but there's still some really good signings and a lot of stuff that went down during the second week of the NFL free agency period. So we're here to talk about that, of course. Dan Snyder, always on side take a headline, and then there's some quarterback controversy possibly brewing in Jacksonville. We're going to talk about the most underrated offseason, the most improved and least improved teams, as well as talk about some of the biggest names that are still on the market. And of course, we're going to have our best of all buy or sell segment talking maybe who had the better offseason between the Packs and Bucks, Sam Darnold's future, and also maybe some quarterback battles with Indianapolis and also what's going on with the New England Patriots. But of course, I'm your host, Ross Allen, joined alongside by A.K. Alex Krupp. And we're here to get things going. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic on this fine Thursday. It is, yeah, like you said, free agency is wrapping down a little bit, but that does not mean there's not still impactful moves that can be made by all 32 teams in the NFL. And that doesn't mean that there's ever going to be a slow news day in the NFL because you got owners like Dan Snyder out there just ready to completely flip the course of action on everything. So, yeah, ready to dive in. Let's get going.
Whew. So, we're talking about Dan Snyder. Let's talk Dan Snyder because what's going on is that there's a couple things going on with Washington. As of right now, they're still looking at possibly a new name, but there's a lot of people thinking that football team might actually stick. Then there's also Dan Snyder buying helped by the NFL to buy out all of the majority or the minority owner shares of the team. So Alex, first off, the first part of the news, are you okay with Washington football team being a permanent name, or do they actually need to get something real?
I mean, I'll be honest with you. It's kind of like marketing 101 that any publicity is good publicity. And when you have something which is something that's really hard to do in the NFL, especially with such a commercialized product, to have something unique in the NFL will always get headlines, will always make you talked about. And even if you just pull every single random person on the street right now and you say, out of the NFL, like which team do you know? All the like you might just have a random answer of someone like, well, isn't there one team that doesn't have an actual name and it's just called the football team? And it's like, why wouldn't you want that? I mean, branding aside, where you don't have an actual look, you don't have an actual mascot associated with you. You don't have guys running around on the side of the stadium in a big dolphin costume or a bear outfit, anything like that. You lose that aspect, but what you do get is you still have a cool logo because I think burgundy and yellow is a very very cool
Yes,
cool
I love a good
scheme.
basic font W is my logo.
Exactly. And it's like you have something different than every other team in the NFL, and that's you don't have a name. And when Ryan Fitzpatrick posted that Instagram video where he goes at the end of it, "Let's go football team." It's like that's not a generic statement anymore. That means the Washington football team. I think it's kind of genius that they might stay with this. And to touch on that second part, Dan Snyder, I don't know why um, Roger Goodell in the NFL front office loves this guy's presence so much that they would give him a 450, $500 million basically debt forgiveness to then go out, buy out the minority owners, do it 2 years before the actual big TV money comes in. So he gets, almost 80 cents on the dollar of what it actually should cost. And now all of a sudden he has full ownership of an NFL football team.
I don't like it because Dan Snyder is pretty much the captain of a sinking ship right now, in terms of just how that franchise has been ran and all
And a
the
ship with no name.
ship, a no name ship. Well, you have the ship is just what it's called. It's just called the
Yep.
ship, head by Captain Dan Snyder, and it is sinking because there's been so many just awful and damning reports coming out of that front office and coming out of how that team functions in the just kind of the happenings in terms of all the sexual assault stuff, and let's not get into things because it's just never ending. So I don't understand why the NFL backs this guy so hard, because clearly he can hardly even run a football team. I mean, how many times have you seen people make fun of the Washington formerly Redskins or the Washington football team? I could say the R word because I said formerly, so don't get at me. And then also, I think, to your point, Alex, it is eye-catching. It is, I guess, creative in terms of marketing sense, but at the same time, it's so stupid. I can't get behind it. I can't. When
You don't
said,
have to.
when Fitzpatrick said, "Let's go football team," I was like, "Was this some like really generic, like high school football team or something like that?" Where
It works.
I
Just think about the pure essence of this. We started off this show today talking about if the Washington football team should change their name from the Washington football team. Last offseason, we were talking about potential names for the football team. If they really wanted to, and if they were smart, they would have a 5-year plan of, okay, at this point, we're going to get a mascot. We're going to get this. We're going to get this perfect logo, and everything is going to be perfect for this massive unveiling.
But here it is. What you do, Alex? Here, I'm going to interrupt you because I got something better for you.
Okay.
Every single year until the NFL dies, you tease a name change. Every single year.
That's what I'm saying. You just cut me off my 5-year plan before I was getting to the
your 5-year plan is, I'm more like forever plan. Every single year you tease it. You never lock down something. You're going to end up sticking with Washington football team for the rest of the time. But there's always like, oh, we're going to change it. Oh, maybe a mascot. Maybe a new logo. If you're Washington, the best thing you could do though is have a all black alternate uniform. At this point,
I saw that picture of Chase Young, and
clean, right?
Although I've had all the Chase Young takes, and where I've clearly said he's not a bad player, he's just way overhyped, and he's not an elite pass rusher yet. Everyone can just go check the tapes on that one. He looks freaking sick in an all black uni. My gosh,
with the visor. Oh, the visor. Whew. Can we bring back with the tinted visor too? Ooh.
Yeah, bring back LT.
Bring back LT. I miss LT. That was some good foosball back then. And then the second thing I want to talk about before we get into free agency, Alex, is that apparently the Jags have not been taking any calls for Gardner Minshew, even though they've had interest. And they also just signed a former Niners backup, CJ Beathard, which isn't a half bad signing, all things considered.
It's really bad.
Yeah.
It's really we've proven this time and time again that CJ Beathard is not a comparable backup.
If they signed Nick Mullins, then that'd be a whole different story. That'd be a Super Bowl team right there. Maybe. Yeah. No, let's pump the brakes. But they're going to be bringing in Trevor Lawrence this offseason and through the NFL draft. If they don't, then all this can just kind of be put to bed, though. But we already talked about, Alex, that Trevor Lawrence and Gardner Minshew, those are not two quarterbacks that you want in the same quarterback room, especially when one's a vet and one's going to be a rookie. And Gardner Minshew has plenty of talent. You could get a good deal from him. You could probably get at least a second rounder for Gardner Minshew, depending on who's trying to trade. So why haven't they?
I also love how we call Gardner Minshew a vet when he's been in the league for 2 years.
Technically, he's a vet.
I know. It's just so funny. And I agree with you. I think he is considered the vet in this situation. But it's like, all right, CJ Beathard is not a vet. And Gardner Minshew is also not a vet. And it makes absolutely no sense. What they should have done is you trade Gardner Minshew for a second and a fifth or something like that. You bring in CJ Beathard, and then you bring in like an actual old head starting quarterback. Like, don't quote me on this one, but you bring in like a Joe Flacco type. You bring in like a Mike Glennon type back to Jacksonville. And it's like, that could be your stable backup, the old head in the quarterback room. But right now, if you have this quarterback room of 3 guys in Jacksonville, you have a combined starting experience of maybe a year and a half in the NFL, and that's just not going to get it done for a guy that you're going to completely turn the keys over to. And I don't see Gardner Minshew as the guy that's going to take Trevor Lawrence under his shoulder and come on, young Padawan, let's go. We crank up the
Gardner
film.
Minshew's still coming for an NFL starting job. He's not going.
Yeah, I just don't see that being in an environment where Trevor Lawrence has the most around him from a support standpoint to be able to grow, and it just doesn't make any sense to me why they wouldn't trade Gardner Minshew. They drafted him late. They've developed him to a point where they can now flip him for a much better asset, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. So I have no idea.
No, just hurry up and send Gardner Minshew to the Patriots because that's what we've all been waiting for. That's what I've been waiting for since the beginning of the year, the first week of January. That's all I've been saying. and that's all that needs. That's a Bill Belichick move right
Perfect.
there.
Perfect fit.
Just make it happen. But now let's transition on into the NFL free agency breakdown of the show, Alex. And like I said, we are going to talk who's had the most underrated offseason / free agency period so far. And I got 3 teams in mind. They actually all begin with a B. So let's get to the first one. And I swear I'm not trying to be a homer on this one. But if you look at what happened with the Broncos, essentially, John Elway got promoted but demoted at the same time, going away from GM, taking a vice president's role. They bring in Patton to lead kind of the Broncos GM to lead their offseason and who's going to be leading the draft. And he's done a damn good job his first year with the Broncos because not only was he able to pick up Von Miller, he was able to re-sign Shelby Harris, he was able to re-sign Kareem Jackson, he was able to bring in Ronald Darby, Kyle Fuller, they brought in Mike Boone. I still hate that they let Philip Lindsay walk, especially since he joined the Texans. Like, why would you join the? I gave my piece on episode 56 that we released last week. You can go listen to that if you want to hear me rant about Philip Lindsay. But Mike Boone's still a legitimate running back. He's a 1,000-yard rusher. He was good with that Vikings team, and he's going to be good with the Broncos. And the Broncos are still third in cap space in the league, and I already have an idea of the next guy they should bring in. We'll get to that in a few minutes here. But I love what Denver's been doing so far, and they still have a lot that they're able to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is definitely a team that, they have a lot of pieces on the team, and they just need to fill in those gap positions. They need to have just a good mix of the young and obviously veteran talent in there. I think this is just an organization that's going in the right direction. I think Kyle Fuller has a better name than what his production on the field has shown to this point. Will it take a defensive mind like Vic Fangio to actually unlock all that he can do?
I love the reunite with Vic Fangio because Vic Fangio had a Pro Bowler in Kyle Fuller.
Exactly. So I think just putting those two people together that we know have had success in the past, and also bringing in Ronald Darby, a veteran guy in that secondary. Kareem Jackson, Shelby Harris were massive to bring back, and as well as Von Miller. Still have a bunch of cap space. I think this team has a lot of runway to get better. I don't know what getting better entails until you fix the quarterback spot, which is the common theme every single time we talk. But when you have Drew Lock at your quarterback position, your ceiling is a 500 team. It just is. There's nothing different about it.
You want to know how you improve that? George Patton can become goated in Denver if he brings in Deshaun Watson, hands down. If he brings 100%. In Deshaun Watson, that's a perfect offseason. I'm going to keep speaking to existence, Alex, because it's going to happen. The Niners don't need him. No, not that. The Niners can go get Gardner Minshew if they want to take him for the Patriots, or maybe Justin Fields type. Maybe we'll be getting some draft stuff out here soon, though. The next team I want to bring to you that has had a underrated offseason free agency period is the Cleveland Browns. This was a playoff team that was good. They were a solid team last year, and they were a couple points away from beating a Patrick Mahomes-less Chiefs in the playoffs and somehow advancing after that drudging that they put on Pittsburgh in the first round. That was just so damn brutal. But this is a good team that got even better so far. Bring out John Johnson and Troy Hill from the Rams to get your defensive back help, which John Johnson, Troy Hill, of course, when you have a defense that has Aaron Donald and has Jalen Ramsey, there's some guys that are going to get overlooked, but these guys, I don't think they really got the credit that they deserve from last year. Then they also get Malcolm Smith, Anthony Walker to boost that linebacking core. They have an already talented offense. They need to bring up that defense. That's exactly what they've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, the Browns, it's kind of counterintuitive to think about, but they have been making good moves for the last 4 to 5 years, and that's
what you weird to say.
It really is. I mean, going back from their old management, they brought in a lot of very good defensive players. You had Myles Garrett, you had a really, really good cornerback core led by Denzel Ward, and with that, and with the combination of bringing in the elite skill position players, you brought in Odell Beckham, you brought in Austin Hooper, you brought in Jarvis Landry, and supplementing them with good draft picks, it creates the foundation for a good team. And then you need that final piece. And that final piece, and sometimes is a quarterback, and other times it's a good head coach like Kevin Stefanski that can unlock that quarterback. Because before Stefanski arrived to the Browns, Baker Mayfield was almost looking like a total bust from that class. Then you bring Stefanski in, you do the things that Baker does well, and all of a sudden you now have an asset. You now have a quarterback that you can win with and that you can have a ceiling above 500. And these additions that they made this offseason, getting John Johnson, getting Troy Hill, both from a secondary from the Rams that was number one, number two in the league for the entire season. And yes, that does help with a great pass rush. But if you look at both of their coverage numbers individually in their PFF grades, they were incredible last year. And adding them to that secondary with Denzel Ward, and with some of the other guys they got, and they still have an elite pass rusher. They go from maybe the number one pass rusher in the league to the number two pass rusher in the league. So they still have that support from the front seven. So I love what the Browns did this offseason. I think those peripheral moves where you supplement that good team, that good foundation that they already laid the groundwork for, it has just been a great offseason for the Browns. Not sexy, but you don't need to be sexy when you have the foundation like we talked about already. So love what the Browns did this offseason.
Man, imagine being a Browns fan right now, Alex. This is real, almost uncharted territory, is what it feels like. Because first, you make the playoffs last year, you win a playoff game last year, you almost win a divisional round game last year, and now you're going off of that and you're building up something positive and making a good team better. I really hope they're able to contain themselves, because I wouldn't know what to be able to do with all this good news. I feel like something's wrong, you know? So
Agreed.
those Browns fans deserve it, though. And the last team I want to touch on is having a underrated offseason, is one of the worst teams in the league last year, and that is the Cincinnati Bengals, because they've been able to bring in Trey Hendrickson. Although they might have overpaid a little bit for him, it wasn't a Bud Dupree type situation at least, but there's overpay there. Still, nonetheless, fantastic talent to bring on. You bring in Mike Williams, you bring in Chidobe Awuzie, key to that Cowboys secondary over the last couple of years. So he's a fantastic piece to have. And then you also bring in a guy that we talked about a number of weeks ago as one of these big names that might be cut to the cap situations, and that's former Vikings left tackle Riley Reef. You now bring in a really good and veteran offensive lineman to be there for Joe Burrow's blind side. And I know any offensive lineman they brought in this offseason would have been an improvement, but Riley Reef is a great name and one of the more underrated free agents that was on the market this year. He's not a Joe Thuney kind of guy, but he's a solid guy. He was solid in Minnesota. He was solid for Kirk Cousins. He was solid for Dalvin Cook in that running game. And he's only gonna allow a rookie quarterback still, because he never really had he didn't have close to a full season coming off a bad injury. That's going to be key to keep him protected. Try to keep him upright, or at least give him more than 2 damn seconds in that pocket. Great move for the Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on Trey Hendrickson a little bit, because that's one of those guys where you wrap up free agency and you say, Trey Hendrickson got some of the highest money of the offseason and some of the highest AAV of the offseason. Mm-hmm. And you see the big sack numbers. And some people say, big sack numbers, that's one of the most fraudulent stats out there, because, you could have a quarterback fall over and the closest guy gets the sack for it. I mean, what is that telling you? But Trey Hendrickson last year, number 3 in the NFL for pressure rate, which is massive in the NFL. And on third downs, which the Bengals were atrocious on in pass rushing, number 1 in the NFL with a pass ratio, or with a pressure percentage of almost 25%. So a quarter of the time on third downs, he is getting to that quarterback. He is causing an inaccurate throw. He's getting home. He's getting a sack. And from a defensive standpoint, the best indicator of defensive line win rate, defensive line actual contributions to the game is pressure rate. It's not sacks. And when you have a guy that's top 3 in the NFL in overall pressure rate and number 1 on third downs, that's a guy you can pay $15 million a year for. And that's what they did. And they upgraded Carl Lawson to Trey Hendrickson. Ironically, guys that were drafted about 11 spots away from each other in 2017. But they upgraded that position. Carl Lawson also got $15 million a year. So I think upgrading Lawson to Hendrickson for the exact same dollar amount was massive for the Bengals. One of those moves that's not going to grab a headline, but you just make those moves on the outside, moves on the peripheral, and that's how you build a winning football team.
Bengals, you might actually not be a bottom feeder team next season. Crazy
They're
to
they're
think.
they're kind of on the same path as the Browns were.
Yeah, except with the way better quarterback.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we're not getting arguments there, and I really don't expect any arguments from anyone unless they're probably a Browns fan. Now let's keep on things. Let's keep things on rolling, and let's go into our most and least improved teams. Now, Alex, I want to start off with the most improved teams because we're positive here. We're going to start with a positive, and then we could crap on the other three teams here in a couple minutes. But one of the most improved teams is one that we're talking about at the beginning of the show, and that is the Washington football team because they've been able to bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick, Samuel Cooper, Will Jackson, Lamar Miller, slightly underrated. He at least in the past he's been a fairly talented, almost like a reminds me like a diet Le'Veon Bell, the way he's able to kind of bounce around and take some time and be a little patient, but still have that little bit of speed. Honestly, I'd rather him over Le'Veon Bell right now. Way cheaper too. And then also David Sharp and Tyler Larson, all good moves for the Washington football team. And this is a team. I mean, they're in the NFC East. We already made enough NFC East jokes last year. We don't need to keep that going because they're just kind of overrated or overdone at this point. And thank you. Sorry, Alex. I appreciate your correcting. Not Curtis Samuel, or not Samuel Cooper. It's Curtis Samuel. A couple Samuels out there. A lot of names, a lot of free agency. I've been, like the NBA stuff. It's hard to keep up with some of these, but that's why I got a man like you on the show. I like what Washington's doing here. Their ceiling and their floor both raised tremendous levels. I like Ron Rivera, the riverboat. He's still going there. He's changing that locker room chemistry. He's changing that team culture, and he's improving the team. And they're gonna be able to compete in this division no matter who they brought in this offseason. And I think they've gone from a below there's no kind of debate there. They were a below average team, and now they're average, and I would say they're getting close to that above average team with a good offense potentially. And then especially if Chase Young is able to keep developing, get that secondary pass rush move that you've been begging him to develop, this could be a good football team.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the biggest issue with Washington last year was obviously the offensive side of the ball. It wasn't a lack of the top tier weapons because they have that. Terry McLaurin is a stud. Antonio Gibson's a stud. And the problem with these guys was Antonio Gibson just could not find running lanes at the end of the year. Their offensive line is not the best. Terry McLaurin was the only offensive threat on the outside, save for a Logan Thomas, breakout towards the end of the year. But, when you had a quarterback that couldn't get those guys the ball and Terry McLaurin getting so much attention, you had the issue of where is that secondary offense going to come from? And with the addition of Curtis Samuel, with bringing in Ryan Fitzpatrick, you don't just bring in the alternate weapons. You bring in a quarterback that has the ability to spread the ball out to multiple locations. He can throw the ball deep. He can throw the ball in the mid-tier. He can go off play action. He can throw the ball short. He actually has a little bit more, scoot and boot to his game than everyone gives him credit for. Almost like Alex Smith before all the leg injuries. He could run for a 3rd and 7 first down every now and then, and he can get you 4 yards at the goal line if you really need it.
I think people forget that he was a really solid quarterback when he was still with the San Francisco 49ers. He was good.
Agreed. He was. I mean, he's not a bust for the number 1 overall pick, and everyone thought he was going to be when they drafted him. But or after the first couple of years. But what Curtis Samuel does, and which something that is extremely underrated, is it's just a guy where when he's on the field, you have to be alert to where he is at, because a lot of the times he'll take you to where the ball is going to go. And when you have that attention diverted from your best 2 offensive players, like Antonio Gibson, like Terry McLaurin, it just opens up opportunities for them. And I love what that addition to it. Riverboat Ron knows what he's doing with Curtis Samuel, coached him in Carolina, knows what he can bring to the table, knows how to use him, which is the biggest downfall for some of those Curtis Samuel, Tavon Austin, Percy Harvin type guys, is a lot of teams just don't know how to use him. When the Dallas Cowboys brought in Tavon Austin, I remember there was one of the early games, Sunday night game, they were playing against the New York Giants, and he went in for a bomb, 80-yard touchdown right on the side of the field. That was the last time you heard of Tavon Austin that year because they don't know how to use him. He's not a deep threat. He's a Swiss Army knife guy. You run him on reverses. You run him out of, bubble screen, run him deep, run him across the field. You do all these different things, and Ron Rivera knows how to use Curtis Samuel, so I love these additions to the team. Other guys I'm not too excited about. Lamar Miller's been dead for the last 3 years, but they have enough running backs in Washington where that's not going to make a huge difference. It's really just how Fitz can incorporate himself into this offense, and he's proved he can do that in the past, so I like what they've done.
And then the second team that is by far the most improved is the New England Patriots. I don't think we need to spend too much time on this team, quite frankly, because we talked about them a lot last week, and what else could be said about the Patriots? I mean, they took every free agent that you could. They overpaid on some. They have the best tight end room in the league, bar none. And then if they bring in a quarterback, it's just going to make things that much better. And we'll talk
ding, 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 ding.
And we'll talk about quarterback possibilities a little later in the show. But they still need a quarterback. But besides that position, they stacked up the defense. They stacked up the offense. They're improved. I think it's safe to say that.
I mean, yeah, they definitely improved, and it all comes down to that quarterback. You can't make all these moves and not have a plan at quarterback because spending all this money, pretty, I wouldn't say recklessly, but they definitely opened up the checkbook this offseason. And you cannot do that in a situation where you have Cam Newton as your starting quarterback. That just doesn't make any sense to me at all. They need an upgrade at that position. I can't imagine they don't upgrade that position. And even when they signed Cam Newton, we saw that 1 year, $10 million number on it. It's not that much at all. It's really just $2.5 million signing bonus, a base salary of $1.5 million, which is the veteran minimum, and then a bunch of roster bonuses. So that is not a $10 million contract. That's something a lot less. And they have a ton of room to still bring in another quarterback, an impactful quarterback, which is what they need to do.
Exactly. And then the team that is going to bring in a very impactful quarterback is the last most improved team, that is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Between what they've been able to do with getting Shaq Griffin, Carlos Hyde, a underrated signing in Marvin Jones, you get Roy Robertson-Harris, Philip Dorsett, Malcolm Brown. These are all some very, very solid signings. The Jags had a lot of cap space. They still have the number 1 overall pick. And they're just going to keep going this offseason. They're already tremendously improved with this, just a little bit of talent. And they can only get better with the draft and with all the draft capital. So I love what the Jags have been able to do. Kind of surprising seeing Urban Meyer. I guess he's been doing a good job as a head coach, bringing in some free agents. He's not really used to having to pay for some guys to bring in. Normally just gets them for free. But the Jags have been making some good noise during this NFL free agency period.
And I love how he only brought in one of his old guys. He had to give Carlos Hyde that little all right, Buckeye bum. You can come into the fold here a little bit. But I think this Jags team, it's the biggest highlight is going to be Trevor Lawrence. And what can you do to set that man up for success? And bringing in Marvin Jones, bringing in Philip Dorsett, 2 guys that can make big plays. Shaq Griffin on the outside, very, very underrated cornerback for the Seahawks the last couple of years. It's just, they've made smart moves, and bringing in Trevor Lawrence allows you the flexibility to make all these, outside cornering moves. It's going to be how quickly can they integrate Trevor Lawrence into this offense? Is he an impactful player year 1? Mm-hmm. Is he an impactful player week 1? Or is it going to take him a couple years to get to that point where he is that Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson level that we all think he has the potential to be? So it's going to be interesting.
At least we'll be finding out soon about that one as the draft is quickly approaching us. Now let's move into the least improved teams, or teams that have even taken a couple steps back this offseason. First one I want to talk about is a team out there in the desert, and it's not the Cardinals. It is the Las Vegas Raiders, because they lose most of their offensive line. They overpay for Kenyon Drake. They hands down overpay for Kenyon Drake. And they cut their best safety in Lamarcus Joyner. John Gruden, What you doing, man?
Yeah, what he's doing is he's losing his whole offensive line, so that's
Whoa,
not
sorry,
great.
sorry. At least they re-signed Marcus Mariota, the most important piece on that team. So gotta give them some credit there.
Yeah, I mean they can look forward to that one half of football where he looks okay and think they might get he might think he might get a big contract in the offseason. I don't know how much that does for you. I think Kenyon Drake is the most overrated running back in the NFL. I don't think he's good at all. Um, Lamarcus Joyner was consistently one of the best safeties in the league. And just losing your biggest offensive weapon, which unfortunately was their offensive line last year, and losing Rodney Hudson, losing Trent Brown, I have no idea what they're doing. Doesn't make any sense. If they got any sort of substance out of that, if they used that money in a different way,
At
I would
least
understand it. But
they
they
re-signed
didn't. They
Richie
didn't replace
Incognito.
it at all. So
No.
I don't get it.
Yeah, no. Raiders once again. John Gruden proving that the only way he can win championships is if he gets traded and put into a hand-picked team that's already going to win the Super Bowl with or without him.
Yep.
Still, when he signed that 10-year, $100 million contract, I said it was going to be an absolute bust, totally overrated. And every year he continues to prove me right. Thank you very much, John Gruden. I appreciate you for doing that. The next team that I want to actually say here is one that maybe other people might not put in this category, but just given kind of like a lackluster off season that they've had so far, the fact that they've had some good re-signings, they had a pretty good trade, but they're a contender, they're a playoff team, borderline Super Bowl contender, but they haven't really made that push to really put them over the edge. That is the Indianapolis Colts, and they re-sign almost essentially their entire offense. They get that trade for Carson Wentz, but who is an improvement in that position, but they haven't really done much else there. I would like for the Colts to made like a bigger push this offseason to really bring in a playmaker, but I guess they're content with saying Pat, so I respect that, but at the same time, they should have done a little more during the first week or two of off season or the
Yeah,
free agency.
I don't understand their allotment of money there to the receiving core. I just think T.Y. Hilton for anything over, 5 mil a year is a egregious overpay. And also when you have a guy when you put so much of your reputation at stake by trading a first round pick for a guy like Carson Wentz. I mean, what's most likely going to end up being a first round pick with all the incentives in that with the conditions. But
Yep.
when you do that and you don't make a push to go get a very gettable Kenny Galladay or a very gettable Juju Smith-Schuster, and you just instead take that money where you could have used it to them, numbers match up, and you bring in back T.Y. Hilton. I don't understand it at all. He looks washed. He gets hurt all the time. He doesn't have the same explosion. He's not a great one-on-one player like these other guys were. Carson Wentz is not a guy that's just going to pick you apart with accuracy down the field. He needs big plays. That is not T.Y. Hilton anymore. I don't understand what they were doing this offseason. It seems like they didn't really have a plan, or their plan was just get Carson Wentz, then figure everything out later. Very different than last year when they brought in a DeForest Buckner and they drafted Jonathan Taylor, and you saw the direction of where this team was headed. But now it just looks like, okay, we're just going to have to bank on Carson Wentz. If he's good, we look good. And if he's bad, we're cooked. So it just seems like a lot to put into Carson Wentz.
That's really what they're doing here. There's still time, like we said, so we'll see if they're able to make a move. Maybe like a last one. Maybe they have a good draft. Who knows? And then the last team I want to talk about is staying within that division in the AFC South. That is the Tennessee Titans, because not only do they absolutely overpay for Bud Dupree, they lose their a key to that offense. Of course, he's not the wide receiver one, but Corey Davis was really important there for them down the stretch, and they've had an absolutely lackluster free agent period, kind of like the Colts, where they haven't really done much. At least the Colts are able to resign all their talent. The Titans haven't been able to do that. I don't like what they're doing there, especially because they're a really good team last year. They were that playoff team, borderline Super Bowl contending team, similar to the Colts. All the Colts they have the edge on them. I don't know what they're doing. Similar situation to the Colts. I just thought they were going to do something a little more than this.
And the interesting thing is I think at least the Titans had an excuse. They didn't have a ton of cap space.
Mm-hmm.
They did most of their spending last year to
Mm-hmm.
re-sign Ryan Tannehill and to re-sign Derrick Henry. So they didn't have a ton of cap space to work with. they at least, I mean, I don't think the loss of Corey Davis is as impactful as anyone thinks it is. I think he's a very boomer bust player that you can easily replace in the draft. And Bud Dupree at least gives them a name, a pass rush name. You get
Knowing the
that
times that
Jadavian.
he'll just end up injured a couple weeks into the season.
Yeah, I mean that's what happened last year with Clowney. So I guess they have that. They know how to respond to that. So, um, yeah, I don't really understand. I mean, the thing is they were just hamstrung by the cap. So I don't think they have a huge excuse as to why they or as to if they could have done anything different. I think what they should have done maybe is instead of spending all your money on Bud Dupree, maybe spread it out a little more. Maybe you bring in a guy like Kerry Hyder or Romeo Okwara or someone that's a little less expensive
Yank
to fill some of
Ngakwe
that.
was much cheaper.
Exactly. So you spend some on that, and then maybe you bring in a secondary playmaker to opposite AJ Brown instead of having to now probably fill him in the draft. So it's interesting what they did, but I can see at least the reasons why they did it because of the cap issues, whereas the Colts can't understand it at all.
No excuses right there. And then, like we've been saying, Alex, that there is still a good amount of talent left on the free agent market. And so here's some three names that still haven't been signed as of yet, and their potential landing spots. The first one I wanted to bring up is former Saints linebacker Quan Alexander, a guy that's very talented. He's a real versatile guy, really good. Right there playing the inside and playing the middle of the field, helping out the run game. He's a multi he has a bunch of tools in his tool belt, so to say. And mostly a cap casualty from the Saints. Great talent that you would love to keep, but with the Saints being like sort of negative $70 million in the hole this offseason, you're not going to be able to keep everyone. And I got three teams that he would be great for. One of them is the Los Angeles Rams that have a real solid defense, one of the best in the league, but they still, if they have a weakness, it's at that inside linebacker position. You have the Green Bay Packers, who arguably missed out on Patrick Peterson. Their biggest move this offseason was re-signing Aaron Jones, which of course fantastic re-sign. They needed that, but they still haven't done anything on the defensive side of the football for years now. At least nothing major. They've always been the team that will draft and will build through the draft. And that only gets you so far because apparently that only gets you championship game appearances, going with what the Packers doing. So they need to make a splash. But my best number one spot for him is a team that's been bolstering the hell out of their defense this offseason. A team, like I said, still third in cap space, and a team that needs help at the linebacker position. That is the Denver Broncos. I think that's the best spot for him, and I think that's the team that will benefit the most and maybe the more realistic landing spot given cap space and allotment and what you're actually able to do with contracts.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think the Broncos are an absolutely great fit for Quan, especially with just what Quan brings to the table. He's a ball hawking, extremely fast east to west middle linebacker that can call out the defense, that can get your guys organized. He's not great in pass coverage, but he's serviceable in that direction, and his instincts and his speed to run down guys, especially that Chiefs offense, is going to be extremely valuable. And but I think the Packers have missed out on a middle linebacker the last two off seasons, and we're clamoring for Quan Alexander to be traded to the Packers last time when he went to the Saints.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think why not complete everything. The Packers missed on this guy 3 times already. Let's give him a fourth shot at it. Let's bring him in. Let's solidify the middle of that Green Bay defense, and especially when the calendar starts turning to December, January, and things start getting a little colder in Green Bay, and their offenses that they play against start to shift to a more run style, more short pass, start to adjust the offense in that direction to move for the weather. Quan Alexander would be invaluable in that situation because of his speed and because of his instincts and his tackling ability. So I think he probably does land on to somewhere like the Broncos, somewhere with cap space like that. Mm-hmm. He's not going to break the bank, but I think it'd be a lot of fun to see him on the Packers and see what he can do.
Certainly would make Aaron Rodgers a happy camper up there. The next name I want to talk about is a guy that we were talking since the beginning of free agency. That's edge rusher Melvin Ingram. The Chargers cut him essentially, or they said they weren't going to resign what feels like a year ago, and he still hasn't been signed yet. We've given the teams that he'd be great on. Alex said the Raiders. That obviously helped them go from one of the least improved to at least having a good offseason that you could rest your cap on. He will be great in Miami, and also the Panthers do still need an edge rusher to go along with the defense they've been building up. So that's another great spot. But the biggest question here is why hasn't he been signed? This is a head scratcher to me. I'm really confused. Is he asking for too much?
Yeah, I don't know if he's seeing those other numbers of the Trey Hendricksons and the Carl Lawsons and saying, "Oh, well, I'm significantly better than those guys. I need to be up in the 17, 18, 19 million dollar range." But I don't think with his injury history he warrants that. So I think this is a very very similar situation to the Jadeveon Clowney thing we had happen last year, where he's asking for this huge number, is willing to go for a shorter term high money deal, but that deal's just not on the table right now. And as you see teams dwindling with cap space, his representation is going to have to adjust what they're expecting out of this free agency deal, because that money's just not out there. Those spots just aren't out there. So you're probably going to see him take a 1-2 year deal, worth around what those other guys were getting. And it's just going to be have to prove a deal. You're going to have to do that just given your injury history. And I think that's warranted right now.
And then the last guy I would like to talk about is a legend, surefire Gold Jacket Hall of Famer. He's going to be in the halls of Canton, if not 4 years, maybe 5, maybe 6 at the most. But Larry Fitzgerald, his future in Arizona still isn't guaranteed. Nothing's been solidified. There's been talks by these sides, but now there's these rumors that are starting to pour in. Maybe he returns to his home state in Minnesota and throws on the purple and yellow for one last season, and he maybe helps out that Justin Jefferson and aid that receiving core in a team that isn't really gonna be contending for championships, but they're trying to bring him in. Maybe he gets his last season in NFL is in his home state with a young guy that he can help out. But really, I can't imagine Larry Fitzgerald in anything other than the red and black. It just doesn't look right. It's not right. It doesn't sound right. I think Larry Fitzgerald either retires or he signs another 1-year deal with the Arizona Cardinals. But with how long it's taking, I'm kind of getting a little nervous that maybe these Minnesota rumors are a little more substantiated than we were once led on to believe.
This definitely isn't one of those impactful moves of the offseason, but it's one of the impactful moves for just Larry Fitzgerald's legacy, as a whole, because there's something just so cool about getting drafted to a team, spending a Hall of Fame career all with one team. And I think he just loses some of that, warranted that he's going back to a home state, and it's, a cool story to go back to where he started from. But, I just don't think it's worth it for him. And it's like, what do you need another year out of this thing for? If the Arizona doesn't want you back, if you don't want to sign a contract there, sign a 1-day contract, retire with the Cardinals, and call it a career, because he's not producing on the field anymore. If he really wants to go in that mentorship, let me bring in a young receiving core along, just be a coach, dude. You don't need to be a receiver to do that. You can have impacts in other ways. So I don't think it's worth it for him to leave Arizona. If a deal's on the table with Arizona and he wants to come back for a year, that's awesome. If it's not, hang it up and, move on from there. It just doesn't seem like it's too, it doesn't seem like it's warranted to go join Minnesota for a last shot at it.
Yeah, let's keep it with the same team. We don't see that nearly enough as I would like, and maybe call me old school, but I just love that a little more. But shoot, I still kind of want to see Larry Fitzgerald for one more year. Maybe the Cardinals can do a little something, not being winning a ring, but I guess we'll see how this plays out. Hopefully, sometime soon. But there's our free agency stuff, Alex, and time to get into the best segment of all. So let's roll it.
Let's go, watch it. We want the ball, we're going to score.
Tell them to bring me my money. Yeah!
Dollar bills, y'all.
So we buying or are we selling? All right, so here's our buy or sell segment. Of course, you guys love it. I'm so appreciative that you guys have a lot of fun with this one. So, of course, those don't know that how it works, we give you 5 statements, and it's up to you of whether you're going to buy that statement or you're going to sell it. And Alex, the first statement I got for you today is that Sam Darnold is not going to be starting for the New York Jets this season.
I'm going to buy that just based off the odds standpoint, because I think there's three options here. One, he gets traded. That's a very, very clear way of him not starting for the Jets next year. 2, he stays with the Jets. They draft Zach Wilson at number 2, which is looking like an inevitability at this standpoint. And Zach Wilson starts day 1 because he's got that much invested into that franchise. And C, which is I think the only other option, is Sam Darnold stays. They draft Zach Wilson, and then they let Zach Wilson mature until the bye week, and then they throw him out there. But I don't think Sam Darnold is in the plans for the Jets' future. And if it were, that they would, maybe more aggressively be shopping that second pick. But all the talk right now is Zach Wilson and the Jets are almost intertwined right now. And so I see no way that Sam Darnold is in the plans moving forward. So does he start for a couple games while, Zach Wilson gets a little bit more seasoning? Potentially. But I think the more likely standpoint is either he gets traded or Zach Wilson starts day 1.
Now, I guess Corey Davis might have not gotten that memo because he said when he was brought in, Sam Darnold is his quarterback. I think that's highly unlikely.
I don't think Corey Davis knows anything what's going on right now, to be honest with you.
I don't even think the Jets know anything that's going on right now, if I'm going to be honest with you. Actually, sorry. We actually have to respect the Jets as an organization now just because of Rob Saleh. They're not Adam Gase team anymore. So they deserve our respect, at least from that standpoint. And if you're the Bengals, you better hope that Zach Thomas is the guy for the Jets, because you want to know what that means. Who's there at number 3? Penei Sewell, the guy that's going to be Joey Burrow's savior there in Cincinnati. So Sam Darnold.
Well, they pick at 5, but I think Penei Sewell is going to be. I think he's going to be there eventually, anyways.
I think he's going to be, if the Jets don't take him. The
Jets are going to take the top 4. I think the top 4 picks have a very high likelihood to all be quarterbacks. Whether all the teams that are there draft them is a different story.
Imagine that, just 4 quarterbacks right off the board. That would be insane. Speaking of needing quarterbacks, so let's go to the New England Patriots. And I'm going to tell you that the Patriots had a better offseason than the Tampa Bay Bucks did.
Patriots had a better. I mean, like, what do you like? If you get the offseason award, congratulations. I mean, yeah, the Patriots had a better offseason because of the names they brought in, but I'm actually going to sell this statement because I think the Bucks had the better offseason based on the fact that they kept their guys that were crucial to them winning. Godwin, David, Shaq Barrett, Rob Gronkowski. They kept all these guys. They kept Antonio Brown. They just signed Ndamukong Suh, which you put him next to Vita Vea there. That's an incredible front 4 right there with Shaq Barrett, Vita Vea, and Ndamukong Suh, and you have Levante David still manning the middle. It's incredible.
I mean, come on, you're the Patriot. If you're the Patriots, you bring in a lot of big names, which is huge, and I don't want to downplay that. Where I said they were one of the most improved of this offseason, but if you're the Bucks, you just won the Super Bowl in convincing fashion, albeit against a injured Chiefs team, but you still whooped their butts in Super Bowl 55. Now you're able to keep every single starter. You keep all 22 starters in the offseason, where I didn't think they're actually going to be able to do that. I thought at least like a guy like Shaq Barrett might have been gone. I just didn't know if they were going to be able to afford that, but they're able to do it. It's the Tom Brady magic is going on down there. If you're a Super Bowl winning team and you're able to keep your Super Bowl winning team together, I think almost no matter who any other team brings in, you're going to be winning that offseason because, hey, it's proven. It's proven. These free agents, for all we know for the Patriots, they might all be busts. We already know what the Bucs are able to do, especially with that defense. I'm going to say that the Bucs are the biggest winner of the offseason, potentially, at least bigger than the Patriots. And I just didn't put them in their most release improved because they didn't improve. They're same, and that's not a bad thing. It was a bad thing for the Colts, not a bad thing for the Bucs. And then speaking of Colts, Alex, I saw this argument, and I want to propose it to you, and that is Philip Rivers is a better option at quarterback, at least last season, than what Carson Wentz is going to be this season.
So are you saying for a 1-year sample size just on the field that Rivers is better than Wentz? Are you taking in everything into account?
Everything into account.
100% Philip Rivers then. I mean, yeah, first off, you have to give assets to get Carson Wentz. That's less good players on your team, which is in my mind, the goal of the NFL is to get more good players on your team, and
It's a good
Carson
goal.
Wentz costs significantly more than what Philip Rivers would cost. Carson Wentz also, since you bring this player in, you bring him into the fold, you now have to divert some of your offseason attention, some of all of your just your practice time, all that capital you have in the offseason where you need to develop players. You have to now spend this getting Carson Wentz acclimated to the team, transitioning your offense to do what Carson Wentz does better, instead of just rolling with Philip Rivers again, or a guy like Philip Rivers. Like, you could have brought in Fitzpatrick, you could have brought in Gardner Minshew, you could have brought in all these guys that are a step below Carson Wentz from a talent standpoint, but from an actual team building standpoint, those guys fit so much better than Carson Wentz because of the cap number, because of the assets it takes to get him, and because of what you have to put into making Carson Wentz successful there. And I think if you go with one of those alternate options at quarterback, maybe you have a Kenny Galladay this offseason. Maybe you have a guy that's going to actually produce something on the outside instead of T.Y. Hilton at that $10 million a year number. So I think Philip Rivers, or a guy like Philip Rivers, is a much better option than Carson Wentz this year, just because of all the things that we talked about that went into getting Carson Wentz.
Also, Philip Rivers, almost his whole career, although not the clutchest quarterback of all time, he did have enough fourth quarter comebacks to help save him, though. He has been severely underrated, I would like to say, and maybe people need to put a little more respect on Philip Rivers' name there.
Agreed.
One of the last ones is that the Baltimore Ravens, they clearly need a wide receiver one. They haven't been able to get a wide receiver one, at least so far. They've offered T.Y. Hilton. They've offered Juju Smith-Schuster, both guys that resigned with their current teams, the Colts and Steelers. T.Y. Hilton said on the Pat McAfee show that he was 5 seconds away from becoming a Raven, but he doesn't. Is it things, do wide receivers not want to play in Baltimore?
I'm going to buy this statement, and I don't blame him at all. I completely agree with him. Why would you want to play in Baltimore?
No, is it a Lamar Jackson thing, or is it a Greg Roman thing?
No, it's an all the thing. Here's the thing. It is a Lamar Jackson thing. It is a Greg Roman thing, but that's not a bad thing. That's just how you run your offense. Their offense is designed to maul people, to move downhill, to have a lot of different options in the run game. You don't need an elite passing offense right now. Contrary to popular belief, you don't need an elite passing offense to have an elite offense. The Ravens have proven that the last 1.5 years, the half season that they had with Lamar Jackson and the full year with him. You don't, or the 2 full years with Lamar Jackson and the one back in 2018 where he came in half the year. You can run an elite offense with a ground game, a multiple ground game like they had. And if you're number one wide receiver, why would you want to go to Baltimore? You're not going to get the looks that you would in any other offense. If I were the Baltimore Ravens, I would stop worrying about receivers. I would just do what the Patriots did. You go sign a Hunter Henry, you go sign a Jonnu Smith. You have two monsters working in the middle of the field to pair with Mark Andrews, and that's what Lamar does well. He throws the ball over the middle well. He throws contested catches well because he doesn't have the accuracy to fit it in those typical 3, 5, 7-step drop coverages that other pocket passers can do, and just build that offense from the interior offensive line to the running back position to the tight ends. And you just don't worry about putting big money on the outside because you don't need it. You're not going to use them anyways. You can put anyone you want on the outside. They're not going to get the same looks that they would in another offense, and they're not going to get the same opportunity that a big tight end would have in that Ravens offense. So I'm going to buy this statement, and I don't think it's a bad thing.
No, I don't think it is either. And then the last statement I want to leave you with is that, speaking of what the Patriots are doing a little earlier in the show a couple times, the Patriots will be trading up for a quarterback in this draft. They're currently at number 15. We're thinking that maybe the first 4 picks might be quarterbacks. Do the Patriots trade up?
The problem with where the Patriots are at, the problem with where the Broncos are at, and the problem with where the Niners are at is they're all in a position where they think they should probably get a quarterback this year. And 9, 12, and 15 are not spots you want to be to get a quarterback, because someone inevitably is going to jump you to draft that 5th quarterback. Because I just think all 5 quarterbacks are gone by 11, 10, 12. I mean, somewhere in there, all the quarterbacks are going to be gone. And will the Patriots trade up for one? It's possible. I don't think they will, though. So I'm going to sell that statement just because of how much draft capital it is going to take to move from 15 to 3 or move from 15 to 4. It's going to take their first round pick this year, a future first round pick, and probably a couple day 2 picks. So it's going to be a very, very expensive endeavor to actually make that happen. And I don't think that Bill Belichick is going to be able to stomach doing that for a quarterback.
I just don't think that's a Bill Belichick move. Bill Belichick is going to be. He might sink in a lot of money in free agency to sign some guys. I don't think he's guys that's going to be taking years of draft capital away just for one guy now. When for a little less draft capital and for maybe a smaller, or a lower ceiling, higher floor, just get Gardner Minshew. That's what we've been saying. Just get Gardner Minshew. I'm glad we could agree on that, Alex. But, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for us this week in this week's NFL offseason breakdown for Week 6. Let us know what you think in the comments on Twitter, on Instagram, or leave a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts. Before I sign off, big thanks to our Patreon supporters. If you want to become a member of this prestigious group, go on over to patreon.com/4thandlong and get started today for just $1 a month. You could be a part of this group. Thank you to Ray Rodriguez for all your card collecting needs. Go follow at the Big Bat Box on Instagram. Shout out to Neil Wiley and his YouTube channel, Chosen Problems. And a big thank you to Ryan Watson. Alex, thank you so much for joining us here today. Always a pleasure to talk a little bit of football with you. And we'll see you guys in the next one.
Peace.